2019 is the year I pledged to play through the Castlevania franchise and record my journey through these vlogs, culminating in one big video review at the end.
Here's the 6th entry of many more to come, covering Super Castlevania 4.
Welcome once more to the Castlevania Diaries. I'm excited today because we're getting into the 16-bit Castlevania games, which is really what I wanted to play from the very get-go. When I got into this challenge, those are really the games that kind of drew me in, were the 2D 16-bit ones, because I'm a big fan of Metroidvanias, and you know, it's right in the name, Metroidvania, Castlevania. So the whole genre evolved in part because of the Castlevania series. So I'm really excited to get into the 16-bit era. So today I'm going to be talking about the Super Castlevania 4, I think that's what it's called, or just Castlevania 4, which is on the Super Nintendo. And man, what a difference this is after playing 3 NES Castlevanias and 2 Game Boy Castlevanias. Just everything like took a big jump forward for the Super Nintendo. It was really exciting to see, like, the graphics, the overhaul of the graphics was just wow. It was amazing. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy to look back because I've lived through it. I've seen the evolution of graphics, and to still be able to experience that wow factor today, it's rare to almost impossible because we're so accustomed to seeing hyper realistic graphics, very cartoony stylized graphics. You can see pretty much any style, but the fact that I've been dabbling in this franchise for about 2 months now in a very retro 8-bit style, and to finally like play a 16-bit a 16-bit evolution of this genre, it hit me kind of the same way, where I was just blown away. I'm like, wow, everything here is so beautiful, so much more detailed. The animations on the enemies are crazy. Like when you destroy an enemy, they blow up and there's like an animation of them falling apart. Everything about it felt so much more advanced than everything else I've played. You know, you've got deeper backgrounds, you've got a way wider color palette. There's just so much going on. Your whip mechanic, let's talk about the whip mechanic. That thing has finally evolved from just whipping left and right. Now you can whip up, you can whip down, you can whip to 45 degree. And then if you've got a certain hook, you can even like whip that and swing across chasms and stuff. So the whip mechanic is awesome. Oh, and then there's this weird like little flaily thing where you're like doing this with the whip. I don't like that. That's weird. You know, it's really empowering when you time an enemy that's doing this weird pattern towards you, and you time it so when you whip it, like, you know, he's just the right distance and you smack him in the face with like your ball on the chain. That's satisfying. When an enemy is up close and you're just like flailing your whip a little bit, that's not satisfying. That's just like derp Castlevania. It's like Castlevania derp. It's not cool. So yeah, a lot of that stuff I like. The difficulty of the game has been toned down a bit, I felt, which was good. Because the NES ones, as you know, I didn't really like them, especially Castlevania 3. My god, did that leave a bad taste in my mouth. The bosses, I really like the bosses in Super Castlevania because, well, they look better. I felt that the patterns were a little bit more predictable. So to me, a good boss fight, like ideally you should be able to figure it out before you die. But back then they didn't really do that. So if I die maybe 2 to 3 times to a boss for me to figure out what its pattern is, I feel that's fair. Like, I feel I'm not getting cheated. And in this game, that's exactly what would happen. These bosses weren't ridiculously hard once you understood their patterns, how they'd move, and where you needed to be. So that was great. The one downside I was really surprised about is, you know, the 16-bit era has a very magical, I don't know, vibe to it for me. Like when I look at all the franchises I really fell in love with, like Super Mario, Zelda, it's in the 16-bit era that they really shine. Like Super Mario World had a fantastic soundtrack, and just the gameplay, everything like evolved so much over Mario 3. With Zelda, A Link to the Past, the music in that game was just so damn good. Like you had so much more. The themes were the same, but everything was just fleshed out a lot more. And of course, 16-bit era is when you have Star Fox that came out. Like, there's just so much good that came out of the 16-bit era. So I was expecting, my bar was very high for Castlevania. I was expecting the 16-bit pretty much coat of paint would have done the same to Castlevania as it would of all the other series I played. And I was let down in one area, which was specifically the music, which I'm really sad about, because the one thing that drew me to Castlevania was the music. And Castlevania 1, to this day, still stands out as one of the most iconic Castlevania games to me so far, because it has such a wonderful soundtrack, even though it's on a 8-bit platform. So Super Castlevania has very like cool ambient themes, but nothing that really stood out to me as, you know, I'm not humming. I can't even recall any songs in Castlevania 4 until you reach the final section of Dracula's castle, and you've got like Vampire Killer playing there, and the other one, what is it? The one from Simon's Quest. I forgot what it's called. But those themes were remastered, and when I finally got there, I was like, oh yes, thank you. Like, this is good. I'm at the end of the game, and now I'm getting the cool themes and all that, and it just really gets you in the mood to like, all right, let's finish this game. Let's beat some monsters. So I feel they could have done a better job in that regard of just having better themes. Like, it felt like a really big step down, especially considering all of like the Game Boy ones, the NES ones, each one had a pretty iconic piece of music in them, right? Another thing I liked was the end setup and how there were so many like mini bosses leading up to Dracula. It really reminded me of how I used to play with my action figures. I had this like Ghostbuster tower, and that's what I used as like my main villain castle or whatever. And I would always put my like most evil figurine at the top, and then like all the sub bosses, like it would go in order of like the most badass at the top to the weakest minion at the bottom. And a lot of my games often involved having the heroes go into this Ghostbuster tower and fight all of the bad guys until they reach the climactic boss battle at the top of the tower. So the fact that Castlevania 4 set it up in a similar way where, you know, you're fighting these monsters in increasing difficulty until you hit Dracula was a very similar vibe to how I used to structure my own stories in games. So I really enjoyed that. And the fact that some people were pointing out some of these monsters were actually converted or brought over to the Netflix series is even cooler. It just kind of brings the whole lore together, which is another thing I need to get into. I'm falling hard into the Castlevania Kool-Aid right now. I don't know if you guys can tell, but we're going to talk about it more. But my God, this series, it just keeps giving the more you hack away at it. And I'm reading up, like I'm just scratching the surface on the lore. I feel I need to go through all these games again just to go at it with more understanding of the lore and appreciating everything that's happening in these games. I want to get like into the comic book series. I just want to watch a ton of YouTube videos about the lore. I need to get those amiibo. I want the 2 Castlevania amiibo now. So yeah, I'm really liking this franchise. But onwards onto the next title, which is Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis, and that will be the last game on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection before we move on to the Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night 2-pack on the PlayStation. So can't wait to play those. All right, I'll see you next time on the Castlevania Diaries. Take care.